Good day everyone. This is Group 2 and we are going to report the Chapter 2 Building Identity prepared by Ms. Karen Pundano, Mr. Jamer Wilson, and Mr. James Harold COMETA. Chapter 2 Building Identity or the Social Self. At the end of this lesson, we aim to learn the following. Number 1, different representation of the self across discipline and perspective. Number 2 is different influences and factors that shape the self. And lastly, the sociological theories about the self. The first one in the list is the feral child. Feral child are deprived of mental, physical, and social growth because they are reared in total or nearly total isolation from other humans. So in other words, feral child po is a condition where an individual or a children are deprived or lack in mental, physical, and social growth. So they have parang nagkakaroon po sila ng problema sa pakikipag-communicate sa ibang tao because they are isolated nga from other humans since they are child. So there is a case in 1932. Her name is Anna and she lived in Pennsylvania, USA. Ang mother po niya is young, unwed, and mentally retarded woman who lived with her strict father. Outraged by his daughter's unwanted pregnancy, the grandfather did not want the child in his house. However, sa kagustuhan ng nanay niya na palakihin yung bata na si Anna, itinago niya si Anna sa isang storage room. Though she gave her enough milk to keep her alive, hindi naman siya nabigyan ng loving attention, wala ring mga smiles or kahit ano, like hugs, as suppose a normal mother would provide for her child. Anna was neither washed nor bathed by her mother. So sa loob ng napakaraming taon, hindi si Anna nabigyan ng tamang suporta at atensyon ng kanyang nanay dahil siya ay nakatago lang sa isang storage room. At the age of 6 in 1938, she was found by a social worker. And at that age, hindi pa rin siya nakakalakad or kahit magsalita man lang. All she could do was to lie quietly on the floor with her eyes staring blankly and her face was expressionless. So, dahil nga hindi man lang siya nangingitian or nakakausap ng magulang niya, walang kahit anong connection or contact sa mga tao sa labas, Anna grew expressionless. She was placed under the care of local authorities at a country home. Anna received extensive social contact and soon showed improvement. So, nakuha nga ng mga social workers si Anna, so they take care of her until she shows some improvements nga. Over the next years, she made a gradual progress by showing more intense interest to people, learning how to walk and feeding herself with less assistance. Not until she was 10 when she began to use simple words. So, after 4 years, mula nung nakuha siya ng mga social workers, tsaka pa lang siya natutong gumamit ng words para makapag-communicate sa ibang tao. Because Anna's mother was mentally retarded, perhaps Anna was also mentally challenged. However, hindi nga napatunayan na gumaling si Anna because she died at the age of 10 dahil sa blood disorders. So that is an example of a condition of a feral child. In this part, papasok naman tayo sa the social construction of self. So we're going to talk about what self is. So self, it is a psychological construct that people create in order to assist themselves and the world better. Without interaction with others, a person cannot acquire physical and mental development, or worse, he or she will not survive. So self, it is anything that people create in order to assist themselves and the world better. Parang it is anything that involves about ourselves. The way how we talk, the way how we communicate, the way how we think, the way how we behave, that is self. So they said that without interaction with others, a person cannot acquire physical and mental development, or worse, he or she will not survive. Kagaya ng, let's say, the feral child. The condition of a feral child where they are isolated with other person or other humans. Wala silang interaction with others. Kaya hindi sila naka-acquire ng physical and mental development. In order to give more information about the self, here is the sociological theories of the self. The idea about the self that is used in defining a person who he is points to the central part of the sociological process. Kagaya ng sinabi natin kanina, the self represents ideas regarding the characteristics, behavior, and qualities of a person. Under the sociological theories of the self, there is psychic wholeness. So what is psychic wholeness? It is the idea that each person have a distinct one, bounded and coherent being gives the latter this kind of feeling. So usually, naririnig natin yung phrases na to sa ibang tao or minsan sa sarili natin. Like, I am proud of myself. Or minsan, I hate myself. Or minsan, I love myself. So in other words, this is just like talking to ourselves. This conception represents that a person is aware of who he is and parang sinasabi niya na unique siya sa ibang tao. Because alam niya kung ano yung self. Alam niya kung ano yung self niya and aware siya sa sarili niya. So that is a psychic wholeness. So the next one is the looking glass self. According to Charles Horton Cooley, 1864 to 1929, people change or develop their respective concept of self as they engage in social interactions. Also, according to Cooley, it is a process by which a person develops his or her image based on how others treat them. It is a subjective process and it is not necessarily in accordance with what is real. So, he said that through engaging to social interaction with others, or nabubuo yung concept niya sa kung ano yung sarili niya. So, for example, when we are talking to other person, kung ano yung magiging comment nila sa atin, parang yun yung magiging concept natin sa kung ano yung ating sarili. Halimbawa, sinabi sa'yo ng kaibigan mo na napakaganda mo or napakabait mong tao. So, those words will sink in your mind and parang isip mo na, yan, ito ako. This is me. That explains na nabubuo yung concept ng self ng isang tao through social interaction. Also, according to Cooley, looking glass self is a lifelong mental process that is characterized by 3 phases. So the first phase is, it is how one images appears to others. For example, one may think of himself as gaining some extra weight, such that he's becoming fat. So it explains that looking glass self is based on what others' perspectives. Kagaya ng, if some other people think that gaining fat means you are fat, parang yung perspective nila is nagiging perspective mo na rin. Then nagsising in sa isip mo na, if you gain extra weight, then you are becoming fat. Parang yung perspective nila is nagiging perspective mo na rin. Kung ano yung pananaw ng iba, nagiging pananaw mo na rin. So that is the first phase of the looking glass self. The next one is the second phase. Inside this is, one will imagine how others will judge his or her appearance. For example, people will typically think of obese people as unattractive. So, kung dun sa phase 1 is, nakukuha mo yung perspective ng ibang tao directly, sa second phase is, you will only imagine. Parang ini-imagine mo pa lang kung ano yung magiging judgment ng ibang tao sa'yo. So, typically, people think that obese people are unattractive. So, kapag nakita mo sa sarili mo na tumataba ka, you're gaining weight or gaining extra fat, you will think yourself as unattractive because yun yung pumasok sa isip mo. Yun yung nag-sink in sa isip mo nung nalaman mo na ang judgment ng ibang tao sa obese people ay attractive. So that's how second phase works. Last is the third phase. It is a development of emotional reaction based on what one's perceived others' judgment to be such as pride or shame. For example, one will feel embarrassed or ashamed regarding their obese state. So, kung dun sa first phase, nakuha mo pa lang yung idea na when you are gaining extra weight, you are fat. And in the second phase, when you are fat or you are becoming obese, you are unattractive. So, doon sa dalawang phase na yun, nakuha mo pa lang yung idea from the other people, for the other person, for the other person's perspective. In the third phase, ito na nabubuo yung emotional reaction. Whether you are being proud, or ashamed. For example, people will feel embarrassed or ashamed regarding their obese state. Because you think that you are unattractive because you are obese based on other people's perspective. Nabubuo yung emotional reaction mo. You will feel embarrassed. Or dito na talaga nabubuo yung kung ano yung magiging reaction mo based on other people's perspective. So that is the third phase of the looking glass self, according to Cooley. Also, looking glass self does not only provide description of who a person is, it is also responsible for the evaluation of oneself. So, because you got other people's comments to you, or other people's judgment, other people's perspective onto something that reflects on you, nagkakaroon ka ng evaluation sa sarili mo or self-evaluation. Na-evaluate mo yung sarili mo. Parang through their comments, nabubuo mo lalo yung self mo. Nabubuo mo lalo yung perspective, yung concept of the self mo. And also, looking glass self has two important dimensions. Dito nabubuo yung self-esteem and personal efficacy. So first, what is self-esteem? The first one is the self-esteem. Self-esteem is a belief that one is good and valuable to others. So parang you're having the confidence to yourself that you are good and valuable to others based on how they treat you. And also, self-esteem is governed by two principles. The first principle is the process of interaction, where a person observes others' behaviors for pieces of information on how they appraising him or her. These are reflected appraisals on oneself that is reflected in the behavior of the others. Parang, it is the process of interaction. Kapag while you are interacting to other people, ino-observe mo yung behavior nila for process of information. If they are being true to you, once they appraise you, if they are being true or if they are saying or being sincere to you or not, that is the process of interaction. And the next one is the social comparison. These are the people who evaluate and compare their own performance, ability, and characteristic with others. Hence, they can rate themselves as superior, equal, or inferior. So this is the type of self-esteem where you are evaluating or comparing yourself to other people. Na nare-rate mo yung sarili mo as higher or superior to other people. That is self-esteem. The second important dimension is the personal efficacy. Based on this principle, a person believes that he or she can rise above obstacles or challenges and eventually achieve his or her goal. The primary determination of personal efficacy is the nature of personal experience. So in this principle, someone has the confidence and determination that he or she can rise above any obstacles and challenges. Because they have because nabuo na nila yung self nila, nagkaroon sila ng nature na they are determined and they are confident na any obstacles they will eventually they will achieve it and they will overcome it. That is personal efficacy.
Theory of social behaviorism. George Herbert Mead, 1863 to 1931. He developed the theory of social behaviorism in order to explain how social experience shapes a person's personality. So for us, what is social behaviorism? So, social behaviorism is pag-uugali na maunawaan lamang kapag nakikipag-interact tayo sa ibang tao. So, for example na lang ay ako. Bilang isang anak, so yun, nakikipag-interact ako sa family ko and alam na nila yung behavior ko at pag palaging maganda yung pinapakita kong behavior sa kanila. Nabibigyan ako ng reward, ganun. Kasi natutuwa sila sa akin. So, Mead explained his theory with 3 parts. The first one is he viewed self as the central concept which is part of the individual's personality and is composed of self-awareness and self-image. So, the self is the product of social experience and ito daw ay hindi parte ng katawan and that not exist at the same time of birth. So for him, self-develop as interacts with others. Without interaction, the body goes without self. Second, Mead explained that social experience is the exchange of symbols. Human beings find meaning in action by inferring people's underlying interaction. Only human can use words and other physical gesture to convey meaning. So, dito naman yung parang nabibigyan agad nila ng kahulugan yung ginagawa natin base sa mga kinikilos natin habang nakikipag-ugnayan tayo sa kanila. The third, according to Mead's point of view, by taking the role of another, a person becomes self-aware. A person initiates an action and continues the action according to how others judge his action. So, Mead thought that the process of somewhat move restricted. He thought that only certain people could influence our perception of self and only during periods of life. He also thought that the way that others influence us changes across the lifespan. So, for example, Mead believed that infants and other very young children were not actually influenced by others in any way. Instead, he believed that young children see themselves as being the focus of their own world and consequently they don't really care about what other people think of them kasi nga mga bata pa sila ganun. So at the same time, they also lack of ability to even take the perspective of another person. So for those who you are familiar with psychology and with developmental psychology, you might realize that this is very similar to Piaget's concept of egocentrism. But Mead also believed that as we grow up, our beliefs about how other people perceive us start to become more important to us. Also, according to Mead, children develop their self-concept in 3 stages. The first one is preparatory stage, play stage, and the game stage. Preparatory stage. During the initial 2 years of infants, they respond only through imitation. They mimic behavior without understanding the underlying intention. Hence, no self yet is developed. Children interact with others through imitation. So, they might play with pots and pans when a person is cooking or use a broom or a toy vacuum when their parents are trying to clean. It of course usually winds up making more of a mess, but these are not really true interactions. As these children grow older, they start to focus more on communication with others opposed to simple imitation of them. They get practice using symbol things like gestures and words and other forms of communication that they will later have to master as they grow up. Play stage. At about the age of 3, children begin to take the roles of significant others. For instance, children pretend to be their mother or father while they play being the significant other in their lives. In this stage, children become more aware of the importance of social relationships. Made believe that this was reflected in children's tendency to pretend play as other people. So they play as mommies or daddies or whatever they want. And whereas before they were really incapable of taking on the perspective of other, now they are really focused on them. So now they are really focused on role taking or mentally assuming the perspective of another person and acting based on their perceived point of view. Even though this might seem like imitation, the kid you saw in preparatory stage, this actually goes way beyond it because the children are able to respond. They are not simply capable of mimicking social interaction. They are capable of creating them. So the last stage is game stage. Based on this stage, children begin to play the roles of generalized others. The generalized others are those people who do not have close relationship with the children but influence the children's internalization of values in the society. So in game stage though, children's understand of social interaction become even more developed. During the play stage, children become able to consider the attitude, beliefs, and behavior of the individual who are closest to them. But during this stage though, the game stage, they start to understand that truths, beliefs, and behaviors of what referred to as the generalized other or society as a whole. So with this comes a whole new understanding in society. So for example, start to realize that people not only perform in ways based on what they personally believe, but also based on what society more broadly as expect of them. So they also start to understand that someone can take multiple roles that before are not simply moms or doctor or teachers, that they can be multiple at once. As all of this is happening as children, it's like to acknowledge the generalized other, they start to realize that people have multiple roles. They also start to understand that other people must have opinions about them and that those perceptions are influenced by how they act and what they say. So in response, they themselves begin to influence by this perception. They start to be concerned about the reaction of others to what they do. Mead believed that this understanding lead to the development of the I and the me, where the me is our social self and the I is our response to the me. The me is how we believe that generalized other see us. It is what we learn through interaction with others. The I think about what those things mean. For example, the me might understand that people in the US typically go from high school directly to college, but the I might wonder if that is best, if maybe it would be best if some people traveled or if they maybe work from a few years. So I actually always found this term to be somewhat confusing. The way that I think about it is to think about the me as society's view, and then the I is the individual identity stepping in or our personal responses to what society thinks. Even though we have these two parts and might seem like they are conflicting, Mead would say that who we are, our actual self, is the balance of both the I and the me.
Irving Goffman has provided additional dimension to understand the self and socialization. According to him, people in their everyday life are very much like actors performing in the stage. If one image himself doing what goes on in the theater of everyday life, he is doing dramaturgical analysis, the study of social interaction in terms of theatrical performance. As people interact, they behave like actors by following a script that they have learned from their parents, teachers, and friends. The script essentially dictates a person how to behave based on his status and roles. As a person presents himself, he reveals pieces of information about himself to others, consciously or unconsciously. His performance includes the way the projects according to the setting of the drama. Goffman illustrated the dramaturgical approach by describing the change that occurs in waiters' behavior from the kitchen to the dining room. In the dining room, the waiters project a polite gesture to the customers, while in the kitchen, they openly reveal their irate behavior or sometimes ridicule the servility. They must portray porn storage. As people move from situation to another, they drastically change their self-expression in the front stage. People present themselves the way others expect them to be. While on backstage, where there is no audience, they reveal their true self. Performances. Flaws may still surface. The result is embarrassment or discomfort after spoiled performance. Goffman refers embarrassment as losing face. However, audience often overlooks the defects in the performance of the actor, which allows him to save his face. He calls this action as studied non-performance in Hans Christian Andersen classic story, The Emperor's New Clothes. A child blurts are because the emperor is naked, which is actually true. However, he was scolded for being rude. Discomfort not only for the actor but for everyone, just as the audience feels uneasy when an actor forgets his line. People who have seen an embarrassing act are reminded of how fragile their own performances are. In real terms, the society functions like a dam holding back a sea of chaos. Should one's performance brings a leak, others tactfully help make repairs. In short, Goffman's research shows that although behavior is spontaneous in some respects, it's more patterned than anyone else thinks. Masiones 2006. Whether a person is conscious or not, his concept of self is necessary part of his life. The sense of self is critically important in determining one's own thoughts, feelings, and action, how one views the world, himself and others that includes relationship with people, things, and events. In other words, one sense of self is the core of one's thoughts, action, and feelings. Each person carries and uses these perceived internal attributes to direct his or her thoughts and action in various social situations. Erving Goffman, na nabuhay mula 1922 hanggang 1982. Siya ay nagdagdag ng mga bagong pananaw sa ating sarili at pakikisalamuha. Sinasabi rin niya na ang mga indibidwal ay katulad ng mga artista sa entablado sa kanilang pang-araw-araw na buhay. Ang dramaturgical analysis o ang pag-aaral ng mga social interaction sa mga tuntunin ng theatrical performance ay kung ano ang ginagawa ng isang tao kapag iniisip nila ang mga sarili na nakikibahagi sa kung ano ang nangyayari sa pang-araw-araw na buhay. Ang mga tao ay kumikilos tulad ng mga aktor kapag nakikipag-ugnayan sila sa pamamagitan ng pananatili sa isang script na natutunan nila mula sa kanilang mga instructor, magulang at kaibigan. Ang pag-uugali ng isang tao ay pangunahing inireseta ng script, depende sa kanyang katayuan at mga paksyon. Hindi man sinasadya o sinasadya, ang mga tao ay nagpapakita ng mga aspeto ng kanilang sarili sa iba, habang nilalarawan nila ang kanilang sarili. Kasama sa kanyang pangarap kung paano niya ipinakita ang kanyang sarili alinsunod sa kapaligiran.
And that's all from Group 2. Thank you.